Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in this one, we are doing our weekly PvP data analysis to see which specializations are starting to rise and which specializations are starting to fall as a result of the changes that they implemented a few weeks ago. We also just concluded the vast majority of the AWC, or the Arena World Championship Tournament Series. We only have one team left to qualify to BlizzCon, which will be happening after the Mythic Dungeon International on Friday. Between Sidu's team and Maro's team in Europe and North America for that sixth and final spot at BlizzCon. But I just wanted to see what was going on the ladder. What's going on with the representation? How are the specializations doing? Is the game randomly shifting in terms of meta, even with them having no changes for this week? And maybe also trying to anticipate what could be some possible changes for Friday, given that this is like the last weekend of tournaments. There is a patch coming in with 12.0.7 and then obviously 12.1 at some point as well. So to get an idea if maybe there could be some changes or not, I think reviewing this type of data is a good way to try and estimate that. And as always, if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. Now, the first thing that I'm noticing on this melee DPS graph, we're looking at 1800 rating and above in Solo Shuffle at the moment, is that honestly, Ret and Warrior used to be astronomically higher than everybody else. They're actually coming down a bit. And they did nerf Templar and Ret. They brought Arms Warrior down 3%. And when it comes to ladder gameplay, these specs are incredibly dominant. I do think if it weren't for those meddling Frost Mages, that they would have likely been dominating tournaments as well. But Frost Mage was so good in tournament that it really kept these specs in check. But when it comes to the ladder, where the Frost Mages don't have coordinated Rogue Mage setups, these guys are still kind of running the show at the moment on the ladder. And Retribution Paladin now functions more as like a utility support. It provides a lot of off healing with Eternal Flame, a decent amount of damage during Avenging Wrath, but certainly not even close to as much burst as Templar was providing previously. And a lot of players are either very frustrated by that, or some players are saying that that's actually what Ret Paladin should be, utility-based kind of support spec, providing a decent amount of overall damage. Regardless of that, it's still in a really healthy position, and so is Arms Warrior when it comes to the ladder. And if they did any tweaks to Frost Mage, we'd likely see these specs continue to perform even better. Unholy DK is surprisingly doing really well. The main issue for Unholy DK is the Spinning Crane Kick Mistweaver build at the moment, which is also very overpowered in Mythic Plus. So I do wonder if that will get put in check, given that it is kind of breaking the game in both environments, where Mistweavers in PvE you just spin to win, and in PvP completely counter pet classes like Demo and BM and Unholy. We kind of have to see, because if Mistweavers didn't exist, I do think Unholy would, if that build was more in line, it didn't do so much AoE healing with how many pets they have, Unholy would actually probably be in a very solid spot. It does still struggle with Arms Warriors and Windwalkers, but it's actually doing better than Windwalker, even despite that. It's probably because of the Mistweaver representation from 1800 and above, and we look at the healers, we'll see exactly what's going on. But it is a good pick. It's just unfortunately that into Mistweaver Monks, you're just like completely hard countered at the moment. Windwalker Monk, still really good in terms of offense. Some of the best burst in the game with Zenith. I do think its defense is where its weak point lies, and its infrequency of stuns. So it can't just stun people as much as a rogue, and its defense is a little bit more shaky than other melee, which kind of keeps it in line, but it still absolutely KOs people with one-shots. And I don't really know if they are intending on bringing, the one-shots in line with every class, because they did try to bring some one-shots down. Windwalker's definitely still up there. We saw it in the tournament, just absolutely clocking mages, and even the best mages in the world not able to ice block in time with how much burst damage it does. So I don't know if they'll bring down its burst. I've said this every single patch. Like, I wish they'd bring down its burst and bring up sustain a tiny bit, but it just hasn't happened. So you guys are probably just going to be left where you are, which is just a really strong position. Enhance is doing a lot healthier in this season than a lot of previous ones. It's still very one-shot oriented, though, around Doom Winds. I think a lot of players have shifted over to Totemic now as well, although Stormbringer is really easy with the Ascendance one-button smash build, right, and can run people over. So it's doing well from low rating all the way up to high rating as a result of that, as you can shift between those two builds. Subtlety Rogue is actually taking the #1 rogue spot now over Assassination. I think Assassination last week was actually above this, and I've been playing mine, and actually it's really strong still. I've been really enjoying it. Subtlety Rogue has just been absolutely cranking. I'm probably going to play some actually tonight on my stream, or in the afternoon on my stream, so subscribe to the channel if you want to follow along with my gameplay live there. We're going to be doing some PvP commentary and giving you guys like a detailed run through of what I'm doing and my thoughts in the game as well. But it's just really strong. You can just stun people every 16 seconds and does so much damage in those windows. Havoc has recovered a bit from where it was, but it's still somewhat kind of falling off. I think it's probably because it's struggling with this Subtlety Rogue and Windwalker, and I think when we look at the range DPS, you'll see what's going on with Marksmanship Hunter and be like, oh, this is probably what's keeping it in check. I also think Devourer, Demon Hunter is maybe still just a little bit more popular because it's still new and it still does such crazy one-shot damage. But Havoc is actually very good. And I think the Rain from Above PvP talent is probably one of the most underrated ones at the moment. It does a huge amount of damage. There's a huge amount of damage. And I've seen some Demon Hunters playing Eldraki and other ones are still playing Fellscarred. So I'm not sure which hero talent tree is necessarily getting ahead. But Havoc is moving into a much better position since the most recent changes. Assassination Rogue, although its representation is a bit lower than these guys, it's really good. We even saw it qualify in the Chinese arena tournament. In tournament play, typically Subtlety just can stun more and more on-demand burst than Assassination. Better peels because of that. And then Outlaw is just more durable. So I think its durability is one of its main issues, but it has one of the best one-shots in the game right now with Kingsbane and Deathmark. And they did actually make improvements to Assassination Rogue where Deathmark doesn't get removed by Cauterizing Flame. Only the bleeds do. So if you reapply the bleeds, you get the duplicate again, which was a nice quality of life change, especially given how many Preservation Evokers there are at the moment. So it's actually really good. Fury Warrior is finally starting to climb. This guy was at the bottom to begin with, and I've been playing into a couple of them over the past couple of days, and it actually feels really good. Now again, Mage, Frost Mage is going to 100% keep you in line, but against basically any other caster, it feels like you just mow them down almost effortlessly. When I've been playing my Elemental Shaman or my Shadow Priest or a Warlock and there's a Fury Warrior on me, it's like, feels like I'm just dying to auto attacks in like 20 seconds. So yeah, Fury Warrior is definitely going to be on the climb. Frost DK, still complete Feast or Famine spec. It's either one-shotting you with its Pillar Go or it feels like it's doing nothing. I really hope that it gets some type of specific attention because of that, because it's more egregious than even any other class I can really think of the game other than maybe Marksman Hunter at the moment, but it's still performing really well. Pretty straightforward specialization. It's just what you come to expect with the Frost Decay, Death Grip, Blind Sleet, Dragon Stun, everything, and pop cooldowns and try and one-shot people. It's been doing that same setup since like Legion. I think it's basically been the same class since then with a couple of new animations strapped onto it. Feral Druid, I think the spec is actually still really good. We saw a lot of it in the tournament, but it's kind of like a high-level specialization, and you have to put a lot more effort into it to get a similar result that you could maybe get with a Warrior on the ladder or a Ret Paladin, and usually players are path of least resistance, right? So if this is harder to play, they're like, I'm just going to go on the Warrior, get my elite set that way, as opposed to this way. Although there are some players who actually do prefer the challenge and the harder way, but I think it's less. So that's why the popularity is a bit lower. This doesn't mean that Feral Druid is bad by any means. Feral Druid is actually very good. Similarly with Outlaw Rogue, I think Outlaw Rogue is actually still very powerful specialization. Obviously, we saw it pretty much in every tournament, and I believe that it won, the two major regions at the moment. But it's much like Feral. It's much harder to play, a little bit more twitchy. Wish they'd add some quality of life to roll the bones, like a visual display on the screen without having to go into the cooldown manager and getting the icon. I feel like it should have like a Fingers of Frost style when you icons next to your character when you roll like a whatever it is. Now I think it's like a 3 buff or 2 buff or a 1 buff or something like that, or jackpot. Like you should know when you get a jackpot. There should be clear indicators, and there just aren't. So you don't even know what's going on, and you're just searching all over the screen for these random icons with no clear visuals, which I think makes it a bit more complicated. It's also a bit faster, feels like, on the GCD at least when I'm playing it, so it's a little bit more intense than a lot of the other specializations, but it's very strong. Survival Hunter, I actually just got gifted 5 subs last night to play this literally last night, and I was under geared. I had some fun on it. I think the takedown Chakram with Sentinel into Boomstick it's a pretty fun combo. Pretty cooldown dependent though on those windows still. Despite the changes that they applied to it to take down, it still feels a pretty cooldown dependent. And I think Beastmaster and Marksman are kind of just outshining it. The fact that it's limited into melee range doesn't really have a lot of utility to compensate for that limitation. The stripping of utility from Marks and BM was felt, but at least you're ranged and you can just like run away. Survival doesn't really. You can during your Eagle, but then after that's gone, you're kind of just like stuck in the mix. So it's like you can operate on it, but it just feels like it's missing a layer or something would be my opinion on it. Like you can have some fun with it. It's got some fun combos and big bursts, but it just feels like it's missing a layer of utility. Now, when we look at range DPS, we can see Beastmastery is still in the number 1 position, which I find actually surprising because my recent experience on it is that Beastmastery Hunter was not that insane anymore. I I don't actually think it's that insane anymore. So I feel like it's probably going to either stay at this point because there's just so many people who play it. And I mean, the main reason people play it is just because it's so easy. You just log on, attack, press kill command, and press Beast of Wrath kill command, and watch Stampede one-shot people. It's very just straightforward and easy, and gives you some solid results. But I think its performance, for me at least, is lower than Marksman as far as pressure in the game. So I found that very interesting on my most recent playthrough, but it's still really good for anybody who's just jumping into PvP for the first time, or is just a dad gamer and wants something that's very simple and straightforward. Frost Mage is still holding number 2 position even on the ladder, so it's good on ladder and it's good in tournament at the moment. This is a spec where I'm like, I would be blown away if nothing happened to it as far as changes, because I feel like it's a spec where in the hands of the pro players, they're even dying instantly because there's just too much active mitigation on it. Too many keybinds, multiple invisibilities and barriers. I feel like ice block cooldown is way too short. There's just the defense frequency is too high, but then the passive mitigation is too low. So it's like you have all these defensives, but sometimes you just die in a millisecond without even being able to use any of them. So I think shifting away from the active mitigation and reducing the frequency of the active mitigation and making them a bit passively more tanky, so new players on Mage aren't just immediately eradicated, but the best players can't just rotate indefinitely with cooldowns, would likely be a healthy position to move Frost Mage from here. So I would be really surprised if this doesn't get any changes at some point, but it seemingly has managed to dodge everything up to this point. But given the tournament representation, now it's continued ladder representation, I think I'd be really surprised. Devourer Demon Hunter is pretty cool because it's got 3 different builds, and seemingly you can play all of them. You can play the Collapsing Star build, you can play the Predator's Wake build, and you can play kind of a mid build where it doesn't play either of those, and it just focuses on its meta Devour damage spam. So I think it's pretty cool in that regard. I like the warp as well. Being able to teleport around the map is really cool. It's a bit basic, though. On the basic side here, depending on what you're fighting against, it can feel like it's invincible, like against casters and dot damage, or it can just instantly explode against like marksmanship hunters. So it's got some counterweight defense there, but it's really good at the moment overall. Just tremendous amounts of burst. I like the build variety, but I am a bit worried that its top end burst is a bit too high, similarly to Marksmanship Hunter, which is still doing really well. And I actually think it's better than Beastmaster at the moment. The volley and the true shot window just do so much damage, so much one-shot damage, even despite them going into it. I feel like it's been a mistake to nerf aim shot and not the modifiers that are applying during true shot and volley, because the aim shot without cooldowns doesn't even seem that good. But then when you have all your cooldowns rolling, you get procs, it's like, bro, this spec is absolutely nuts. Like, it just one-shots people, similarly to Windwalker Monk. And it does really well at low rating from my experience playing a bunch of new alts that have to start from the bottom. I see a lot of Marksman Hunters that just absolutely rip people. Affliction Warlock doing really good right now, and considering we saw Mercy in the tournament one game, we saw it in China a bit as well. The Drain Soul build seems to be decently effective. I'd say similar to Feral Druid is that you just feel like you have to work way harder for it, but it's likely doing pretty good too, just because there's so many mages. Even though, I don't know, mage is still even pretty tanky even into you as an Affliction Warlock at times, but it's definitely seems like the spec to be if you're a Warlock. It just has a lot of keybinds. I feel like it's trying to do a lot of things all at the same time. But if you're able to pull it off, get a lot of UAs on a target, Drain Soul running, it can be very good. I've seen a couple of Hellcallers as well, although it's not as single target focused, which I think single target is still very much so the ideal way to play. You have to live an incredibly long time for AoE damage to become relevant, unfortunately. Shadow Priest, actually in the middle of the pack, like not too far behind anybody. I'm very surprised because it has like next to no burst damage. I think its durability is probably carrying it in that sense. Although there's some specs that can completely run you over. I think like Windwalker and Fury Warrior can run you over, but Fury Warrior is just not that popular. Maybe is the main reason that you're able to get this high. Psyfiend is your main thing that's keeping you relevant. It's basically because it's like a start dampening button because it reduces healing by so much and lets your damage kind of sink in. I've been having fun on it. I think it's a bit hard. I do think the improvements with Tentacle Slam to apply dots is nice for new players, but against good players, they just dispel it and then you have to cast and it becomes very stressful there. Elemental Shaman, I was expecting to be a bit higher, honestly, because we saw it in the finals, we saw it on multiple teams in the tournament in every single region. It was doing really well. I've been playing mine. I think that maybe it's representation because we're looking at 1800 plus is because when you're fighting melees, it's very hard. It's very hard, especially in Shuffle. It's very hard with dampening as fast as it is. And that's probably why it's representation. Like if we jump this to 2400 rating, it stays in the same spot, although Frost Mage completely takes over, although we do see Marksman starting to shift more. But it still kind of holds in the same spot. I was expecting it to go up a bit because I've actually been enjoying my Elemental Shaman. a lot, but I would say its main issue is like it's very hard to deal with melee DPS, and if you're not getting like a lot of procs, whether it's Earthshock, Maelstrom resets, or Lava Burst procs, it feels like you have to stand still and cast a lot, and you just get ran over. Destro Lock, there's nice small improvements to Conflagrate and Incinerate, but it's still very stationary relative to a lot of the other ranged DPS, and its burst potential for how much you have to cast is not really relevant. Like these Devourers and Marksman Burst is just way better than what you can do. And Ray of Frost with a shimmer around the corner is just a little bit more guaranteed than you trying to get Chaos Bolt off. Although it's nice with Soulfire being on Fire School rather than Chaos, so you can cast Soulfire to bait kick, so you get a really big hit with that. It's nice. It just feels like the stationary specs, like these three guys here, very stationary, have to cast a lot, and they're kind of on the squishier side, even while having to be more stationary. It's the main thing holding them back. Boomkin, I think, is not that great anymore. It's trending downwards overall. Struggles at low rating with melee, although at high rating, I think when you start abusing the movement speed talents and you just focus on that, it's the only really good thing about it is you're very fast. You're just Sonic, you just go fast and kite around and hope you get to dampening where you can be more relevant, or your teammates are playing one of these specs that can actually win before dampening, but it feels like a very dampening based spec, still very Cyclone focused. The Elun's Chosen build is still just like not really viable. I've seen some people trying to meme and stack Mastery, but I really feel like the Starfire could use more buffs to make it more relevant at this point, because bit of a rough ride. And even though the representation is pretty close, I've been enjoying my Elemental much more. Devastation Evoker, another one that's still trending on the bottom side, even though we saw it in top 4 in tournament, did a lot of damage. It still does a lot of damage. I think it's actually very strong. So it doesn't have the complete one shots, like maybe this guy's just because it's easy, but these guys have really big one-shots, and people tend to, I think, especially at lower ratings, to trend towards the big one-shot classes. Maybe that's the main reason we see its representation down here, because otherwise it does really well into Warriors, which is very high representation at the moment. It doesn't do so well into Rogue, but subtlety is actually pretty high, so maybe that's another reason that it's trending down. Fire Mage, we saw a big pop right at the beginning because it had that big combustion meteor one shot that they put onto the spec, but it's almost immediately fallen off. I think it's just too squishy relative to Fire. It doesn't have the double ice barrier, doesn't have the double ice block on such a low cooldown. It does have the invisibilities, which is nice, but I think its durability is the main reason that we see it down here, because it's actually has more instant burst than Frost by a lot, I think. But its durability is too far down relative to Frost Mage at the moment. Demonology Warlock, I want to say that this is the worst class in the game right now. Just doesn't have any relevant burst damage, huge amount of cast time requirements, very stationary. The only advantage, I think, is the Imp Dispel at the moment. You can dispel crowd control off your healer, switching from the Fellhunter spell like you used to have now into the Imp. That's like the one thing carrying it, and I think the crowd control is somewhat carrying it. But its damage output just feels very low. I think it could use, again, more damage on Hand of Gul'dan like they did, just bump up the number more. Same thing with Boomkin, just like basically the changes that they applied last time, just add more numbers to those same changes. It would help these guys that are trending towards the bottom. Arcane Mage is very low, but I don't think it's worse than Demo. I think that it just being a mage and it has a one-shot makes it automatically better than Demo. But it's much like Frost, there's no double barrier. I think the double barrier with overpowered barriers is crazy, and the double ice block with no hypo now with a low cooldown is just so good defensively. But I think the hard casting is what makes it challenging. It's much like Outlaw. It's just way more hard casting relative to Frost or Fire, and that's going to be more challenging for players that are at the lower end of the rating spectrum here. If we jump to 2400, Arcane stays in the same spot, so it's still challenging even for the higher rated players. But just the big one shot on it, I think, makes it more viable than Demo, just because that's how the meta is currently working. And then Augmentation is really low here, but I've been playing it because Brotaku's been gifting me 5 subs on my stream to play it. I've been under geared on it and been owning on it. Eruption damage after you do your deep breath with the Apex talent duplicating your spells, it hits a lot. Like, it feels pretty cooldown dependent, but also Eben Might giving like main stat to some of these classes when I've played with them, like Marksman or Devourer, they absolutely crank when you buff them. Aug is probably the most slept on spec. I do not think it's bad anymore. If like every tier list, I've been putting it down very low because I just never see it, and I assumed that meant that it was bad, but it's definitely not. It's very good, very, very good at the moment. And then finally here we got the healers. So Discipline Priest is completely taking over. It's very interesting that Preservation Evoker is actually the lowest representation. That's actually insane. But I think maybe if we jump to 2400, that'll change. Yeah, it jumps up to the second healer. But Disc Priest is just always really fun. So whenever it's even remotely viable in Shuffle, we see this. And I think it's DPS players who want fast queues. And Disc Priest just basically feels like a DPS with an instant queue. So everybody funnels into it, and it's really popular, and it's very fun. And it's been like that for multiple expansions. I've been obviously analyzing, commentating, and playing this game at a high level for a very long time, and that trend just continues. Whenever Disc is even remotely strong, very popular spec, just because it's very fun to do damage when you're healing and get an instant queue, basically. Because it's interesting, because like Disc Priest is probably like considered one of the worst healers when it comes to 3v3, but in Shuffle, most popular, super fun, and you can play the Void Weaver to go really ham, or play the Oracle for more standard play. Mistweaver is actually number 2, and Holy Paladin is number 3. So I do think the healer balance has improved significantly. Maybe they can bring Void Weaver damage down a little bit, but then bring up their like, healing throughput, so they're not just like completely screwed if you want to play a Void Weaver Priest, because it's definitely a bit high. But I think Resto Shaman, like I was thinking Resto Shaman needed some buffs. Like what happens to Resto Shaman when we go up here? It's actually just stays in the same position. Resto Shaman, I think, could use like a little bit more healing, a little bit more direct healing relative to the other healers, but the healer balance has improved a lot. Like, if we just ignore this outlier, because Disc is like always really popular, when it comes to Shuffle, I mean, I think it looks pretty solid. I think the melee DPS have been balanced out a lot. I think it's really just the ranged. I think a little bit of tweaks here on the healer, but definitely the ranged DPS. Like here, these guys trending towards the bottom need some love. And some of the durability on Frost Mage needs to come down. But it's honestly, I don't think it's too bad as far as, balance and tuning. It's just a matter of a lot of classes still focus around one-shots. Are they okay with just leaving it like that? Because the goal of this expansion was to reduce the effectiveness of one-shots and to bring sustained damage up. So it really depends on where they want to go and where they want to take that. But overall, I think the balance is improving a lot here. I would say that Shaman, and surprisingly, I don't know how Paladin's is high. Paladin and Shaman are probably still pretty low as far as overall healing output. Maybe Prez is too high, but it sounds weird to say that when it's actually the lowest represented healer here. So obviously you can make it work. But other than that, thank you guys very much for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed my breakdown of the specializations and roles here for this week's update of data analysis. I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you, and see you later.